Usually we introduce ourselves, so I think we're done. See y'all. Well, what we're here to talk with you about today, and you now know a little bit of who we are. The better angle there, okay. Sorry, where am I? What are we here to talk to them about? We're here to talk to you about two books that we wrote called Hiking Atlanta's Hidden Forest. One is the Intown volume, and one is the Metro Atlanta volume. And we're going to get to share with you some of our favorite ways to get out in nature. And along the way, we're going to sprinkle in some history because we're at the DeKalb History Center right now. So hopefully you'll get a little bit of that. But we decided we wanted to start with a little bit of history, and specifically, it is there. Okay, good. Specifically, I wanted to talk about geological time. Ooh, that's true history, right? Do you know that you are sitting almost exactly on the Eastern Subcontinental Divide right now? Okay, I see lots of heads shaking. But just in case you don't know what that is, the Eastern Subcontinental Divide is the ridge that separates two watersheds. A watershed is when rain falls, where does it trickle down to? And so, for instance, I live in Kirkwood, which is just west of here, and I live south of the railroad tracks, so south of the divide, which means any water that falls at my house flows to the Atlantic Ocean. But Zana, I think where you live, which is near Lakewood, if rain falls at your house, it flows possibly to the Gulf of Mexico. Is this true? To the Flint River?
You would know better than I
do. Okay. Anyway, and so, but where we are right now, the water flows to the Gulf of Mexico. So I actually crossed the Subcontinental Divide to get here. And so the reason I want to talk about the Subcontinental Divide, which of course is roughly this right here, this line, and you can kind of see it on the map of Atlanta, is because it's the geography of this area that created the ability for us to go on all the hiking that we go on today. But specifically, all this got started before European colonizers arrived. This map says Creek Nation, but of course the people who lived on this land were the Muskogee people, named the creek by Europeans. And many of the trails that were developed in response to the topography. So when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, the trail went up and over every single mountain because we wanted every single view. But if you're trying to get somewhere, you don't want to go up and over every mountain. You find the way that's the path of least resistance. And so that's exactly what the Muskogee people and the Cherokee people did when building their roads, which we oftentimes call trails today, but they served as roads then. And so many of the roads, paved roads that we have today, are now on the same exact spot. And it all relates to that subcontinental divide. And that's also why Atlanta is where it is, because railroads also don't want to go up and over everything. So much of the railroad was built on the divide as well, because that's where it has the least dips down into watersheds. So when I think about the trails that we hike today, which are trails for fun, so we kind of hope that our trails are going to be, going to the peak of mountains. And some of them do. But a lot of the trails in this area also go right along the edge of creeks. And so it's that relationship with water and the relationship with the ridges which allow us to go hiking. So I think that's kind of my little let's go way back in history to learn why we're going to go hiking. Now, we're going to be both doing a lot of talking, but I asked Zana if I could do this part. So the other thing I wanted to share is about the land that we're on right now. And I think because we're on land that was stewarded for generations by indigenous people, this was also a place where African American people were enslaved. I think it's important to recognize the history of this land. And it's not an easy history because, well, this is America, and not all our history is easy. So as I mentioned, this is the ancestral land of the Muskogee people. They're oftentimes called the Creek. But in 1821, the state of Georgia had amassed a huge amount of lawsuits against the Muskogee to the tune of $350,000 in debt. And much of that was accusations of stolen property. Of course, this wasn't property, this was human beings that they were accusing the Muskogee of having stolen. Enslaved people escaped from enslavement, ran onto Muskogee land, and then when they were not returned, people in the state of Georgia sued the Muskogee. So at that point, the federal agents went to the chief, William McIntosh, who they knew would be most open to ceding land. And they said, we will wipe all these debts clean if you sell us all the land east of the Flint River. That's more or less east of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And that's exactly what William McIntosh did. He sold, I think it was around 6,700 square miles of land. And that land was then divided up in 1821 to form DeKalb County. It was originally Henry County and became DeKalb County. And then all those land lots, which were 202.5 acres of land, were then sold in a lottery to white men, white women, and white orphans. So this was a transfer of wealth from the Muskogee to specifically white Georgians. Do you want to guess how much it cost per 202.5 acres plot of land? $19. Now, in today's money, that's a lot more, but you can see how we are standing here today. And I think we share this because we're big cheerleaders about the public green spaces that we have here in DeKalb County and all through Metro Atlanta. I mean, Zana and I love these places, and we want everybody to visit our public green spaces. But not everybody has been welcome in these spaces, and not everybody feels comfortable in these spaces because of this history. And so I think that that's one of the things we're hoping that you can take forward when you go out and hike these trails is that sense of welcoming and also recognizing the past was hard, but we can make a difference now.
Much shorter than Jonah. So that was a wonderful history. Thank you, Jonah. And kind of like what can we do about that to rectify things going forward? So yes, making spaces welcoming for everyone. That was part of our intention, Jonah and I writing these books, but also there's some initiatives happening, in the National Park Service to have tribal co-management with national parks, which would be amazing. And in Georgia, the Okmulgee Mounds, which is not currently a national park, but it is under the national park system, it is proposed to become a national park, which would be Georgia's first capital NP National Park, which would be amazing. And part of that deal was tribal co-management with the Muskogee tribe, who are currently located in Oklahoma, which is where they were forcibly relocated to after the Trail of Tears. And so that is something that we can advocate for. Senator Ossoff has been a real champion for that, so you can call him, email him and his staff, be like, hey, really excited about that, think this is a really wonderful thing, and hopefully other parks will follow suit and bring Indigenous people back to their native lands to co-steward them, because the lands are better when we have that knowledge from the people who were here originally as well. So thank y'all for our little mini history lesson before we jump into these hikes.
Yeah. So we can go to the I've been calling it the OG book, the original Hiking Atlanta's Hidden Forest. I wrote this back in 2012. It came out in 2014, and so it's been out for a long time. And when it got to be, I guess, 2 years ago, I was just noticing how much had changed in Atlanta. Trees have fallen, trails have been relocated, some parks have been closed, many new parks have been opened. As Zana and I talked about developing this book, the new version of this book, we realized that it couldn't just be one book because there's so much more hiking in Atlanta. And that's a really positive thing. So how did I get to start writing this book myself? Well, I was leading programs with kids. That is very much my vibe too. Like, oh, kids, let's go walk on the edge of the waterfall. And I was leading hikes with kids. And, you heard from Marissa that I hiked the whole Appalachian Trail. And when I arrived in Atlanta, I felt a little snobby about Atlanta hikes. I was like, oh, these little trails here. So I would drive these kids hours to get to what I considered real nature, only to then go on a very short little adventure and then hustle them back in the bus and get them back to their school. And I just decided there got to be a better way. There's more of me doing that, and that's when I realized that there were all these green spaces that truly feel like you're off in the middle of nowhere, but you're right here in our city, and that's how the original Hiking Atlanta's Hidden Forest came to be.
All right, and then how did I come into the picture? So about 10-ish years ago, maybe 12 now, I was working at Camp Seed Environmental Adventures, which is actually located in Decatur. So if you have little biddies, it's a wonderful camp, K through 5. It's all outdoors, nature-based hiking. And we used the original book that Jonah wrote to find our hikes. So just like Jonah was, working with kids, wanting to get them into nature, was going super far out. We were trying to do the same thing, but thankfully we had this resource so we could go to places that were within, a short enough drive that we could go, have a nice safe hike, get back in time for pickup, and still have a wonderful experience. So this is just a photo of us about to shoot the hooch. I'm very short, so I'm kind of there back with the arrow. And Jonah and I ended up meeting at an environmental education conference in March of 2020, literally right before everything got shut down. And I was like, oh, you're Jonah. You wrote this book that, I really love and we use. And then we got to become coworkers. So I was a ranger at Arabia Mountain National Heritage Area. Jonah, as you know, he's a ranger, a naturalist at Mason Mill Park. And so we just got to know each other a little bit better, see how we, jived as coworkers. And it's just such a really great, fun experience learning from Jonah. And so I left that job a few years ago, and now I work for a nonprofit, the National Park Conservation Association. We do advocacy for the National Park Service. And I was kind of in between waiting to get my final offer from that job. And John was like, hey, you're, unemployed right now. I have this really big project I'm working on. Do you want to help me with it? And
I said, do you want to be co-authors?
Do you want to be co-authors? Yeah, he said it better. That's how my mind remembers it. But yeah, obviously I, of course, as you know, I said yes. So we've had quite the journey over, I guess, 10 years, if you want to call it that, going from co-authors, co-workers to now being co-authors. So that's kind of how we met and how we came together to write these 2 new hiking guidebooks for everyone.
And we oftentimes see our stories, our personal stories, as a model for different ways that people enter into a relationship with nature. So for me, I mentioned to you, I was a hiking snob. Yes, that is 22-year-old Jonah on the edge of the Appalachian Trail looking like a woolly mountain man. And then after that, I would go hike in the Arctic, fording icy rivers, sitting in the middle of the tundra. And that's who I am, and that's how I started. But I have really come around. I hardly ever go on big, fancy adventures now because I find so much adventure and so much excitement in going to these trails that are close to home. So kind of my journey shifted. My journey shifted from being somebody who always was thinking to go way outside my box to really. Now I'm just like an Intown kind of dude. And I don't know if our slides are continuing. Somehow, Zana, your slides are, let's see. What's up there now? Books?
Yeah.
Zana, you're going to tell your story without pictures. I don't know what happened. Go for it.
All right. So my story is kind of the opposite of Jonah's in a lot of ways, where he started with through hiking the Appalachian Trail. And I was like, what is a through hike? What is the Appalachian Trail? What is REI? What are these things people are talking about? But I knew I loved nature because I grew up around it. My grandparents, had acres and acres of land. They were farmers. They were fishers. So I knew I liked being outside, but I just didn't have this like knowledge or understanding of all this recreational outdoor things for people. And so for me, my journey to becoming like a hiker, it started with these small trails. It started with me going places by myself, in town where I felt safe, where I felt comfortable, where I knew if I get lost, there's a road somewhere. I just got to keep walking and I'll find it. And so just building my confidence, building my competence, my knowledge and my skill set. And so eventually, in college, I got an opportunity to do an internship in Colorado, and it just really opened up my mind for like the possibilities, and I just really, really enjoyed it and just kind of built from there. And so I've been hiking, lots of different places now, and did a really big solo trip about 2 years now. I went to Banff National Park in Canada, was camping, was hiking, and it was chill, and it was great. And I couldn't have done that without these trails close to home, just learning who I was as a hiker, knowing my abilities, feeling confident and safe. And so, I always, like to say that these trails kind of made me into the woman that I am now. And so when folks feel like you have to do the big things, the big park trips, absolutely, if that's something that you're interested in and want to do, go for it. But there's so much value in having a place close to home that you can hike repeatedly. And just really, really thankful that Atlanta has these trails even available to us.
Sorry about those pictures. They were very beautiful pictures of Banff and of Colorado. I don't know why they're not in there. So of course, what we're going to do is we're going to tell you a little bit of the nuts and bolts of these books. And then we're going to do some guessing games in which we're going to describe some trails to you and see if you can figure out where we're talking about. But even if you can't figure out where we're talking about, you just jot it down and say, I'm going to go hike there. That's just giving you some recommendations. But the first guessing game is, I also wrote this book separately called Secret Atlanta, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure, which is a series of 90 unusual stories about Atlanta. And so whenever I do book talks about that book, I say, what would you say the big three of Atlanta tourism are? And, I get people to guess this, and I would say Coca-Cola would be one of them, maybe the Civil Rights Movement, the legacy of Dr. King, the Centennial Olympic Park. Some people say Waffle House. But when we started writing the book, we found that people also have an idea of what hiking in Atlanta also is.
So if you were bringing someone hiking who had never been to Atlanta before, what are like the top 3 places you think they would want to go, or if you Google hiking Atlanta? Stone Mountain. Arabia Mountain. Chattahoochee. Pretty much. Beltline. Yeah, honestly. Yeah, so for us, we decided, among some of the ones y'all mentioned too, Kennesaw Mountain, Sweetwater Creek State Park, or the Chattahoochee River, and Stone Mountain. Those are kind of the big 3 of Atlanta hiking. And those places are all wonderful. They're all in our books, but they, if you've gone there on a beautiful day, you're going to be shoulder to shoulder with people. So just to give you some data, in 2017, Kennesaw Mountain had over 2.5 million visitors. Stone Mountain gets over 4 million visitors a year. So again, they're wonderful places. There's a reason people visit them, but what if we could spread that out over all of these great parks so they all get some love and resources and just a little bit better experience, so you're not rubbing up against people.
So when I was first trying to figure out how to write a hiking guidebook, I bought every hiking guidebook out there. So I own them all, and I actually use them, even though we wrote a better one. I still use these other hiking guidebooks. What I found is that they were all called something like Atlanta Hikes, or 60 miles of hiking within 60 miles, things like that. And the maps always look like this, where you see the perimeter there, And then all the hikes are just like way far out. And it's like, wait, that's hiking you can do from Atlanta. That's not Atlanta hiking. So one of the things that we're really proud of about these books is that they really are for people who live in Atlanta Metro. And so this is the hiking Intown Atlanta's Hidden Forest map. And you see it's all, we decided to fudge. It's in and on the perimeter. At first I was describing this, these are hikes you can hear the perimeter from. And I was like, people don't want to think about that. But it's like, how some like Tucker kind of feels like it's inside the perimeter, even though it's outside the perimeter, that kind of thing. And then the Metro Atlanta book still stays very close. And what we decided to do, instead of as the crow flies, like 60 miles from downtown Atlanta, as the crow flies is a long drive. But using Google Maps without traffic, what is a 60-minute drive on Google Maps from downtown without traffic? Now, with traffic. So that's why the Metro book is called An Hour or Less from Downtown, because we used an actual driving directions. And so that's one of the things that we're very excited about, is that this includes 125 hikes that are all super close in.
So we wanted to talk about some of the things that are different from the first volume of Jonah's books in these two new updated versions. And one of them is this table, Hikes at a Glance. So if you want to know, okay, I want to hike next to the Chattahoochee River. I want a hike that has some historical significance. I want a 3-mile hike, 5-mile hike. We've included this information, difficulty, bathrooms. Is there a fee? Can you bring your dog? Is there a playground? So you can just kind of get like a snapshot of all the hikes in the book, so you can kind of figure out what you want to do. So that's one of the differences.
You want to do the safety too?
Yeah. So another thing that we updated in these books are safety and difficulty ratings. And so, Jonah and I, we put our heads together and we're like, well, how can we let folks know, how safe a trail feels, or how difficult the hike is. And as you can see, Jonah has about good 2 feet on me. He is a man, I am a woman, so we're different. We have different experiences outdoors. And so I think having both of our heads together was really helpful. So for safety, we had 4 criteria, one being visibility. So when you're on a trail, how far ahead of you can you see? How far behind you can you see? Is someone going to be able to not sneak up on you, but can you see people coming and going? Another would be the parking situation. Is there an attendant present? Is it close to the road? Is it high visibility? Or is it kind of back off where folks wouldn't be able to see you? Another one was, do women hike there solo with their dogs? And I always forget the last one.
It's not in my head either. I was like, I usually can't remember it.
Okay. Bear with me.
Yeah, it's a good. And with the difficulty ratings, we also had a rubric that we used to say, because difficulty for the two of us is different. And so we also did that.
Okay, I found it. And the other one is upkeep. So is the trail well maintained? Okay, so if you're going there, does it seem like there's staff or rangers or whoever that are going to be at the trail? And also, how popular is it, right? We talked about Stone Mountain. You're always going to be around a lot of people if you go to Stone Mountain. There are some trails where you might be the only person because it's still like a real secret trail. So if that makes you nervous, that's just something to know. And we averaged them out in the Hikes at a Glance table and just called it popularity. So we just averaged our safety ratings. And so, don't be deterred if you see one that has like 2 or 1 stars. That doesn't mean it's an unsafe place. Jonah and I hiked all of these trails. It just means this is really up and coming. Okay, you're really going to be pioneering at this trail. So just be aware of that. And then, difficulty, the length, the trail surface. It's harder to walk on like roots and rocks than it is a paved surface or a flat surface. Obviously, the mileage is going to increase the difficulty. So those are all things that we took into consideration and tried to just give as much description as we could, just so folks know what they're getting into, so you don't go into a situation feeling like, where the heck did these people send me on this hike? And you might disagree with what we put, and that's okay. But that was just kind of what we decided when we were putting these ratings together.
So I also am a sucker for a scavenger hunt. I just like finding things. And so in the original book, I decided I was going to find a special tree, 3 special trees on every single hike. And then I was going to place them into the map so people could find the special trees. And as Zana and I talked about this new series of books, we decided that trees was a little limited. Not everybody's as much of a tree nerd as I am. And so we ended up identifying 3 landmarks on every hike. So it might be a historical marker, it might be a waterfall, it might be a beautiful viewpoint, but it might be a tree, because trees are still beautiful. That kind of covers that. So again, hiking Intown Atlanta's Hidden Forest has 61 hikes that are all in and on the perimeter. Hiking Metro Atlanta's Hidden Forest has 64 hikes, and they are all an hour drive or less from downtown. So we're going to go on and do some recommendations of hikes, but we're not just going to make it easy for you. You're going to need to, do a little guessing here. Zana's going to go first, but we're choosing hikes to recommend because we're here at the History Center that have some historical intrigue.
All right, so this first hike is in Carroll County. And this park is nearly 1,000 acres and located in Carroll County with several picnic pavilions, a splash and spray water park, campgrounds, and miles of trails. This park has a variety of options for anyone seeking time in nature. History buffs will enjoy learning about Muskogee Creek Chief William McIntosh, who owned this land until his death in 1825. Any guesses?
Chattahoochee Bend?
Oh, it's
Good guess. It's
just across the river from there.
very close. It's not Sweetwater. Good guess. This is McIntosh Reserve Park. McIntosh Reserve Park, named after Chief William McIntosh. So Jonah kind of alluded to this earlier, but Chief McIntosh was the chief of the Muskogee people, and he has a pretty contentious history, actually. And so this was, his land, and this is actually a replica of his cabin, which is really cool. When you go to the park, you can go in and walk inside, and his grave site is actually directly across from the house. But he fought along the United States during the Creek War in 1813 and 14. But really, kind of the contentious part was with his own people, and he signed the Treaty of Indian Springs in 1825, which sold most of the remaining Creek lands in Georgia to the United States without the consent of the rest of his tribe, which was in direct violation of the Muskogee law. And so, because he did this, the Creek National Council sentenced him to death, and he was executed by his fellow tribespeople at his home shortly after the treaty was signed. So, you can read about his history at the park. Again, you can walk through his cabin, you can visit his gravesite. But beyond that, it's a really... It sounds dark, right? But it's a really beautiful park. It really is. It's gorgeous. It goes right by this really slow kind of part of the Chattahoochee, which I think is really, really beautiful. And there's so much trails there that you can really, I think this hike is about 5 miles, but you could do shorter if you wanted, and you could do longer if you wanted. But this was, I believe it's a county park.
We usually put the land manager in there.
Yeah. Trying to see who the.
See, we write this down and then it goes out of our head.
This is Carroll County Parks and Recreation. This is County Park.
As a Native American, why does he have such a, American name?
So he is actually Creek and Scottish ancestry. Yes. Good catch.
He did have also a Muskogee name, but he primarily went by his European name. Okay, my next one here is hopefully this may be a little easier than Macintosh, but this park was made famous by an unusual trail called the Doll's Head Trail. It's a unique and thriving green space in an area that used to be a brick mine and a factory. And whether you enjoy art, history, birds, turtles, amphibians, trees, there's always something for you to enjoy in this hidden gem in South DeKalb's industrial area. You know what this place is? I see some heads nodding. Constitution Lakes Park, yeah. And obviously this is a place that I've loved going for a long time. In fact, this has been one of your recommendations for a while, and I stole it because we changed some ones for this one. But I wanted to share with you just a couple tidbits about Constitution Lake's history. This was the South River Brickworks, and the reason why there is this lake here is because it was where they were mining the clay to make bricks. And so after the brick factory closed down, it all filled in. So now you have this lake and wetland area, which is fantastic and one of the best birding locations in Metro Atlanta as a result of that. But the other thing is in the background of this picture, you see there's a ridge, and that is Soapstone Ridge, which is a major geological feature in DeKalb County that indigenous people would mine soapstone from in order to make bowls before pottery really became the thing. And one of the cool things about that is as you walk out of the building today, there is a soapstone. It's labeled steatite, which is just another term for it, a soapstone bowl form stone that's sitting right out in front of this building. And so look for that. There's a sign that says steatite boulder, and you can see how people probably 3,000 to 5,000 years ago shaped that stone in order to turn it into a boulder. And that ridge that you're seeing in this picture is where that stone was quarried from. Oh, sorry, I stole the book. Go for it.
I think you have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To what extent was that piece of land affected by the police center that's getting built down there?
Great question. So Okay, I'll repeat it and I'll get on the mic. Okay, so the question is, how much was Constitution Lakes, there it is, still up there? Yeah, okay. How much was Constitution Lakes Park affected by the police training facility, or Cop City as it was called? And the answer is pretty dramatically so. Now, it is very close and it doesn't quite abut Entrenchment Creek Park, which is another DeKalb County park. And it's very close to what was called the Old Atlanta Prison Farm. So obviously there's separate parcels, but that whole area just became super militarized during the controversy. I don't think I'm going to go into the politics of it, but many of the people, as they were run out of the other parks, ended up finding places to kind of camp out in the outskirts of Constitution Lakes Park. At this point, that is no longer the case, and we now have a DeKalb County naturalist, similar to my job, that works at that park, and her name is Tasha Messer. So there was a time where I don't know how comfortable people felt going to these parks in that area, but for better or for worse, that's changed, and I think it's now a place that's more welcoming to all.
All right, this next park is a 200-acre green space with trails that hold vast amounts of history and act as a connector trail for many of Atlanta's oldest in-town neighborhoods. Legend says that General Sherman watched Atlanta burn in 1864 from this park. Today, visitors can take in stunning views of the Atlanta skyline and public art on the paved multi-use trail. This park pays homage to the legacy of Atlanta's civil rights legends, Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, and is also home to the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library and Museum.
Freedom Park Trail.
Freedom Park Trail.
Exactly, Freedom Park Trail. And yeah, the summary I gave just kind of goes over the overview of the history of Freedom Park Trail, the civil rights legacy, connecting Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Park with the Carter Center. But also the park itself was born out of community activism, which is really, I think, a cool story. And so in the 1980s and early 90s, local residents successfully fought a proposed highway project that would have cut through what is now the park and several of the neighborhoods in this area, Inman Park and Candler Park, which are some of the oldest neighborhoods in Atlanta. And as you walk on the park, actually, they've put in these little cards where you can actually read about that. You can see before to where it is now. And it's really cool because it looks fairly similar, some, changes in development. But yeah, it's just such a great mark of resilience of community, as well as paying homage to some really wonderful civil rights leaders and President Carter.
All right, this next one spans two beautiful parks. There are 2 miles of well-maintained trails within a county park, and then it connects to a unit of the Chattahoochee National Recreation Area. So you can walk a multi-use path through a young forest, hike crushed gravel trails over hills and valleys, and then there are unofficial trails within the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area land. This also includes a visit to the oldest still standing bridge across this section of the Chattahoochee River. Does anybody know this particular park? This one wasn't on my radar before we wrote the book either. It's called Settles Bridge. I was really surprised because I had always looked at the Chattahoochee unit map, and it's like there's no trails there. You just drive a gravel road, there's a bridge there, that's it. So I never went. And then I found out there's a county park that's right next to it, and you could just build a hike that combines this county land and federal land, and it's one of my favorite hikes I did. That was a very big surprise to me. But the history that I wanted to tell you is not about this bridge, but about this bridge. So this is Jones Bridge, and this does not exist anymore. Jones Bridge, I think it was right around World War II, was stolen. Yes, a bridge, yes. Now, I'm taking a little liberty with that, but one day neighbors woke up and they heard this big ruckus, and there was a salvage company taking down Jones Bridge, which had been closed, and they were taking the metal. And the neighbors just shrugged their shoulders and were like, yeah, that's fine. It's just metal for the war effort or whatever. And then somebody called it into the county or whoever the people were to call it into, and it turned out this salvage company did not have permits for that. They were literally taking the metal. And so when I first hiked at the Jones Bridge unit of the Chattahoochee, there was only half a bridge up over the river because the other half had been stolen. And between when the original Hidden Forests book was written and this one, the second half collapsed into the river, and then the Park Service had to take the rest of it down. So this picture is an old picture that you can't go see anymore. But if you want to see a bridge across the Chattahoochee, go to Settles Bridge Park.
Cheatham Heritage?
Oh, that's Cheatham, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oops.
Hot mic.
Sorry.
All right. This is an excellent hike for those wanting to escape the crowds of a very popular summit trail. This route is split into two sections, West Trail and Nueces Creek Trail. You'll wind through some of the nicest Piedmont forests in the National Battlefield Park as you pass several creeks near Civil War era earthworks. You might know the park, but the loop is tricky. Not Calm.
He said Kalb Farm.
Very, very good guess.
Yeah.
Not that one. Same park. This is Cheatham Hill Loop at Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. So I think most of us here are probably familiar, Kennesaw Mountain was a battlefield at one time with Sherman's Atlanta Brigade, his march to the sea. And it was a really, really rough battle, lots of huge casualties on both sides. It was a very narrow Union victory, if you even want to call it that. But this loop is really great because it's really, like the description said, it's really quiet. Most folks are going to be going up the Summit Trail, but this is kind of a little bit off the beaten path. And you still get a lot of really great history. You can still hike past those earthworks that the soldiers dug. They still have the markers for the trench lines, so you can still see that history there. And it's just a really beautiful, quiet, little bit secluded option. And if you want to do the Summit Trail, you can do it and then kind of tack this on for a little bit of both.
The next one is one of the first hikes Zana and I did together when we were working on the book. And this was formerly a large plantation, and it's a hidden gem in East Point. It's an unassuming park from the street, but its forest holds the state co-champion white oak tree, named after Hank Aaron. It also has some pink lady slippers that grow around the base of the tree, which is a very unusual plant for this area. So any ideas of this hidden gem park in East Point? It's called Connolly Nature Park. And this one, it's not gigantic, but it's also not a place that most people think, yeah, I'm going to go to East Point for my hiking, right? But the East Point has a couple parks, including Sykes Park as well, that are really cool places to find nature. And this one in particular has been getting a lot of love recently by people who want to do forest restoration. So there's been a lot of removal of some of the overabundant plants that have been introduced from other places. And this forest is really blossoming into just a really gorgeous place. It also has some history that's difficult in that it was a plantation owned by the Connolly family, and people were enslaved on the land. And so I think that oftentimes we kind of don't speak those pieces out loud when we're in these spaces. But to me, that's one of those places, like I mentioned at the very beginning, where we can turn around a space that was that caused pain and harm to now a place that we can rejuvenate and we can find connection. So even though it's still named after the family, which were an enslaving family, it's now a park that's, it's for all. It's owned by the city of East Point. I think next is probably in here.
All right, this park is a great place to escape into the woods from the crowded pavement of the popular Silver Comet Trail. This hike passes the ruins of historic Concord Woolen Mill on Nickajack Creek, destroyed by Union forces during the Civil War because it produced uniforms for the Confederate Army. The far end of the trail brings you to a small waterfall, a covered bridge, and information about the Battle of Ruff's Mill.
It looks like Soap's Creek.
This is Heritage Park. This is Heritage Park in Mableton. And yeah, it does have this beautiful ruin, which was the mill that produced the uniforms that was burned. And then it's a out and back hike. So you kind of walk to the end of the bridge and turn around and hike back. And you can, at the end of the hike, see signage and information about the Battle of Ruff's Mill, which was kind of the last final push Sherman made before getting to Atlanta. This was kind of the final standoff after retreating from Kennesaw. This was kind of the last point before he made it over to over the Chattahoochee into Atlanta. Oh, and it also happened on July 4th, which is just interesting. The Battle of Ruff's Mill, yeah.
Give it away. Okay, no more guessing game. Y'all, many of you know Arabia Mountain already, and this is an off the beaten path hike, which I think is one of absolutely the best ones at Arabia Mountain. It's the combination of the Cascade Trail and the Wilburn Farm Trail. So it becomes a figure eight loop in which you go past a waterfall, and you also get to pass the ruin of Wilburn Farm. There's a pond with a beautiful spring. There's a meadow. It's gorgeous. And you actually get some uphill too. So I think that it might actually be more strenuous than walking up Arabia itself. So if you haven't been to Arabia Mountain, go to the top of the mountain. It's gorgeous. But if you've been there, go to Wilburn Farm. So now we're going to transit. We always get asked as guidebook authors, what's your favorite hike? They're all our favorite hikes. In fact, Zana knows that every time I come back from any hike, I say, oh, that was my favorite hike in all of Atlanta. And she nods just like she's nodding right now. But I think that it goes for you as well. So now we're going to share with you less history focused, but more just like our current favorites. And we're going to have one for the Metro book and one for the Intown book each.
All right, so I won't make y'all guess for this one. So my favorite in the Metro book, this was actually I think this was the very first hike I did doing research for the Metro book. Jonah and I don't know if we mentioned, we hiked every single hike that is in each of these books. And so this was the first one that I did, and I just fell in love. And it's Big Haynes Creek Nature Center. We actually got to do a walk and talk there a couple months ago. And it just blew me away. It's so beautiful. It has everything that you want ecologically. It starts out with this gorgeous, gorgeous wetland. You could just stand there all day and just look for critters. And then you're walking through these beautiful forests. And then you come upon this beautiful meadow. And at the time, the goldenrod was blooming. Then you walk past this weird structure that actually used to be a set of a movie. And there's actually a granite outcrop on this trail as well. And it's a really big park. It abuts the Georgia International Horse Park, but you're just there's so many trails and options. You can really kind of be by yourself and have some seclusion. And it was definitely a place that I always recommend. It's in Conyers, Georgia.
And then the one that I've chosen for my current favorite du jour is what doesn't really have a name. It starts behind Cherokee High School in a little park called Bowling Park, but it's co-managed by like 3 different agencies, including like a watershed authority, like DNR, and also the Army Corps of Engineers. So we've just called it the Etowah Hiking Trails. And that you can hike, in fact, the first day I went out there, I was trying to hike, because we try to hike every single trail. Because we're gathering GPS data, and for a lot of these parks, there's no maps out there for these. So we're creating the first ever maps for many of these parks. So we have to hike every single one to gather the GPS data to create these maps. And I was trying to hike 3 parks that day, and I ended up spending 14 miles hiking in this park, and I didn't get every trail. And so that I was done for the day. After that, I didn't do my other 2, and I had to come back another time in order to actually try to hike the route that we in fact have in the book. And it's just a super gorgeous place right along the Etowah River. But you get to go over mountains, through beautiful forests, hills. It's the Piedmont still. Hills, forests along the river. And there's also this really cool rock. You can see the carving on it. It's the route of the Sulati Trace, which was a route used by colonizers moving in to get around. And there's this rock that has people's names carved on it. So pretty cool stuff. So now we'll go to the Intown book. Your favorite?
All right, my favorite in the Intown book is the Lionel Hampton Park and Beecher Hills Park in the Beecher Hills neighborhood. I'd been coming to this park, a bit before writing the guidebook, but then coming back to the park, writing it just like reminded me why I loved it so much. And I think also what I loved about this park so much was just when I was, writing these books was really difficult and it was really challenging. We're spending hours and hours, miles and miles. And I was doing this hike and I was just like, oh yeah, this is why I'm writing this book, because this park is so gorgeous. I'm having so much fun. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place. I keep getting all these like little nature signals. I walked under the power lines at one point. There's this deer that's just like hopping along. There are these beautiful chanterelle mushrooms that were coming up. And it's just such a cool, like unexpected park too, I think, for the neighborhood. If you go one direction, you're going to go to the west side Beltline trail connector, but if you go the opposite way, you kind of get into this beautiful forested area. And it's also a little bit of a heart, get your heart pumping a little bit. There's some hills, there's some inclines, but there's also a paved section on the way back. So it just kind of felt like a really wonderful well-rounded hike. And yes, just absolutely gorgeous, but also just something unexpected.
Everyone's my favorite, and I work at one of the hikes that's in this book, but I decided, at least this month, the Cascade Springs Nature Preserve is my favorite. It's over on the west side, very, very close to Lionel Hampton, but this has been my go-to for years of I just need a nature retreat. And it's become, when I first started going there, you would walk it, you never see anybody else at Cascade Springs. In fact, there was a time where the gates were closed except for just very specific hours. And sometimes you had to just like call the folks at Wawa, the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, and say, oh, is the gates open? And then hopefully it would be. But now it's super pop. You go there on a Saturday and you're going to see people just like sitting all next to the waterfall that you see Zana standing next to there. Of course, I'm the one that goes into hollow trees. That is the City of Atlanta Park. That's right. Well, thank you for listening to some of these recommendations. Just to wrap up, I think we want to tell you that that we believe that hiking is something that can really transform our individual lives, but also can transform our city. So many times Atlanta is just thought about as a place of traffic, or a place of, big businesses or big sports teams. But we really believe that Atlanta is a destination for hiking. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a while, and I didn't do nearly as much hiking when I was there. I had to drive so much further from Portland to find good trails than here in Atlanta. I guess I'm kind of like wrapping here. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the gist of it, yeah. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. Yeah.